When God decides someone's time is up, he doesn't knock, he walks straight in. That's the kind of energy surrounding this moment, and if you've been feeling a shift in your atmosphere lately, it's not imagination, it's divine enforcement moving through your story like a quiet storm. For months, maybe years, there were people who genuinely believed they had the power to rewrite your ending. They thought they could sabotage you privately, ruin you silently, and walk away untouched. They acted like life was a video game where you were the character they could delete and restart whenever they felt threatened. Yet here you are, breathing, elevating, glowing, while they're running out of spiritual battery and legal lifelines. Here's a fact. Research shows over 80% of people who plot against someone end up creating the very downfall they tried to trigger. Not because of karma, but because guilt, paranoia, and fear eventually sabotage their own stability. It's wild how someone can try to bury you only to fall into the hole they dug because they didn't pay attention to the depth. But that's the universe, precise, ironic, and sometimes a little comedic with its timing. And let's not pretend they didn't just cross a line with you. They sprinted across it barefoot, blindfolded and whispering, "Nobody will notice." Oh, but heaven noticed. God doesn't need fingerprints to convict anyone. He doesn't need a camera, a witness, or a confession. The moment they aimed their darkness your way, the countdown started, not on your life, but on theirs. Because they didn't understand that trying to take your life wasn't an attack, it was a declaration of war against the one who authored it. You survived what was meant to finish you, not because you're lucky, but because you're assigned. And when someone interferes with a divine assignment, they don't get warnings, they get consequences. Sudden ones, sharp ones, life-altering ones, sometimes life-ending ones. God is patient with mistakes, but he is immediate with judgments that protect his anointed. So now the tables have turned without you having to lift a finger. The same people who once whispered about you behind closed doors are now about to face doors they can't escape from, iron ones. They couldn't take your life, but God can take theirs instantly, and he doesn't even need to raise his voice to do it. Buckle up. This story isn't just turning, it's flipping. And the plot twist? They never saw it coming, but you're about to witness every chapter unfold. Number 1, they never realized that attempting to destroy you was a legal contract with consequence written into it by the universe. People often think wicked intentions disappear if they keep them quiet. They think harm only counts if someone sees it, hears it, or catches them red-handed. But the universe doesn't operate like human systems. Spiritual law doesn't wait for evidence. It responds to intention the moment it's formed. The second they decided to interfere with your path, they didn't just do something bad. They activated a spiritual contract they didn't even realize they were signing. And every contract has terms, timelines, and consequences. They thought they were in control. They thought they were orchestrating something clever, delicate, and unseen. They had no idea they were actually building the case against themselves, detail by detail. The jealousy, the lies, the manipulation, the plots, none of it vanished into thin air. It became spiritual documentation. It became the very material that will now be used to sentence them. They weren't plotting your downfall. They were preparing their own judgment file. The truth is, the universe is neutral, but incredibly fair. It doesn't take sides, but it does take records. Every intention has weight, and dark intentions are heavy. When they targeted you, something in the system shifted. A countdown began. Not a countdown on your life, but on the outcome of their actions, because they violated a law they didn't understand. Touching someone who carries divine assignment is tampering with property that does not belong to them. Even the silence you kept, the patience you showed, the restraint you exercised, it all helped seal the contract. Not for you, but for them. Your refusal to retaliate didn't make you weak. It made the universe move faster. You staying still allowed divine justice to get to work without interference. Now their consequences won't come out of nowhere. They'll come from the very things they set in motion. They're walking into a future built by their own hands. And the irony is almost painful. They thought they were destroying you, but all along they were documenting their own fate. Number 2. God didn't just protect your life. He turned their plans into evidence. The part they never expected is that every single thing they did in the dark was being recorded, not by technology, not by people, but by spiritual law itself. They thought their schemes were invisible because no one around you knew the details. They assumed that if they smiled at you in public and stabbed you quietly in their thoughts, it wouldn't count. But with God, intention is evidence. Action is evidence. Even the desire to harm you is evidence. Nothing was wasted, and nothing went unnoticed. What they used to try to break you has become the very thing that will expose them. Their gossip, their lies, their manipulation, their jealousy, it's all stacked up like a file that's been quietly filling itself without them realizing. They thought they were burying proof, but they were creating it. They weren't plotting against you. They were documenting their own downfall one choice at a time. The funny thing is that God didn't rush to stop them. He allowed them to move freely, thinking they were getting away with something. He let them speak, act, maneuver, and plan so that every layer of their darkness could be displayed clearly. Not for your destruction, but for their accountability. They walked straight into their own trap, thinking they were outsmarting you. Meanwhile, God was collecting receipts. And the evidence isn't just what they did. It's how they responded when they noticed you weren't falling apart. That's when their real intentions showed. Instead of remorse, they doubled down. Instead of stopping, they pushed harder. Their obsession became part of the documentation. Now the same things they hoped would ruin you are the things being used to judge them. Their actions have become undeniable proof of who they are, and heaven doesn't need a courtroom to act on it. The protection over your life didn't just shield you, it transformed their attacks into testimony. You didn't have to fight back, expose them, or retaliate. God let them create the story with their own hands, and now that story is what will sentence them. Number 3, they tried to play God with your life, and that's the one role. The real God reacts to without mercy. Some people think they have the authority to control someone else's life, like they can rewrite destinies or decide who deserves to live or die. They acted like they were the ultimate power in your story, as if your life was theirs to manipulate. That was their biggest mistake. There's one role no human can ever assume without triggering consequences, and that's the role of God. You can't negotiate it, cheat it, or outsmart it. Once they tried to take what wasn't theirs, they stepped into territory they were never meant to touch. God doesn't react to human arrogance slowly. He responds precisely and proportionally. Their attempts to harm you weren't just ignored. They were transformed into proof against them. Every lie they spread, every trap they set, every act of cruelty became a violation of natural law, one that would eventually hold them accountable. They weren't just fighting a person. They were challenging a divine assignment. And God doesn't need an army, a courtroom, or evidence in the human sense to act. The moment they tried to assume a role reserved only for the Creator, they activated a response that was inevitable. Their arrogance blinded them to the reality that no evil plan against a chosen path can succeed. You weren't weak, lucky, or overlooked. You were under a protection far beyond what they could see or understand. They tried to act as executioners, but in doing so, they became subjects of a higher judgment. Every action they thought would give them control over you became a step toward their own exposure and accountability. Trying to play God is more dangerous than anyone realizes. It isn't punished with subtle setbacks. It is marked, tracked, and corrected. They crossed a line that can't be crossed by ignorance or cleverness. What they wanted to take by force, God preserved. What they intended to erase, God recorded as testimony. And when the reckoning comes, it will be absolute, immediate, and undeniable, because interfering with a life that is under divine assignment is not just a crime. It's a spiritual declaration that triggers swift correction. Number 4, their punishment is inevitable. Because they crossed a boundary. You didn't even know you had. Every person has limits that are visible to the world, and then there are boundaries that exist on a level most people can't sense. Your life isn't just flesh and circumstance. It carries layers of protection that operate beyond human understanding. Certain souls are never meant to be interfered with, and when someone tries to cross that invisible line, they aren't just taking a risk. They're activating a system designed to respond without delay. The people who aimed to harm you didn't realize that they weren't dealing with a normal target. They didn't understand that by touching your life, they were setting off alarms that reached the highest courts of spiritual authority. Every lie, every plot, every attempt to manipulate or control you was like a key turning in a lock they didn't see. You didn't have to fight, argue, or even retaliate. The system was already in place, and their movements triggered consequences they couldn't avoid. Boundaries like yours aren't random. They're inherited, assigned, and reinforced by divine timing. They exist to protect, to preserve, and to ensure that anyone who tries to infringe upon a chosen path doesn't walk away unscathed. That's why their punishment is inevitable. They crossed a line that isn't negotiable. It wasn't just your life they tried to violate. It was a protected assignment, a life that carries impact far beyond what they could ever imagine. What makes it even more striking is that you didn't even know the full extent of your own protection. You didn't need to see it to benefit from it. Every step they took to try and dismantle you only activated mechanisms that were waiting for moments like this. Their fall isn't coming because of human judgment alone. It's built into the very structure of their attack. They touched something that wasn't theirs, and anything that interferes with what's protected is destined to answer for it. Their punishment is no surprise. It was inevitable the second they decided to overstep. Number 5, their attempts to break you actually exposed how breakable they are. There's something almost ironic about the way people reveal themselves when they decide to attack someone they think is vulnerable. They believe targeting you would expose your flaws, your insecurities, and your weaknesses. But the only thing it exposed was the truth about them. The moment they decided to plot against you, they showed how fragile, insecure, and unbalanced they truly are. It takes a certain level of inner chaos for a person to turn someone else into a mission. It takes instability to obsess over someone else's life instead of focusing on their own. The energy they used to harm you wasn't neutral. It came from a place of fear, envy, and internal conflict. That kind of energy is self-destructive by nature. They aimed it at you thinking it would break you apart. But negative energy always returns to its source, especially when sent towards someone protected. What they sent out was incomplete, reckless, and toxic, and now it's wrapping back around them with the same intensity they tried to unleash. Their collapse isn't happening out of nowhere. It's the return package of everything they projected. People who actively plot against someone always think they're in control. They imagine themselves powerful, strategic, and untouchable. But in reality, the act of plotting is already the first sign of weakness. Strong, grounded, stable people don't obsess over someone else's downfall. They don't waste their time planning another person's pain. The fact that they had to resort to manipulation, deceit, or spiritual attacks showed they didn't have the capacity to build anything meaningful in their own life. Their attempt to weaponize your life was a confession. They couldn't elevate themselves, so they tried to drag you down. In the end, their actions didn't make you look weak. They made you look chosen, and they made themselves look exposed. You didn't break, but the mask they were hiding behind did. The energy they released is circling back, and it's going to collapse the parts of them they tried so hard to keep hidden. Their own instability is the real downfall, and it's already showing. Number 6, they failed to destroy you, because you weren't the one on trial. They were. One of the biggest misconceptions people have during seasons of attack is thinking the pain is proof that something is wrong with them. You probably wondered why you were going through so much, why certain people chose you as a target, why the pressure felt unfair, and why it seemed like you were constantly being pushed past your limits. But the truth is far more revealing. The season wasn't created to assess your worth. It was designed to expose theirs. The entire situation wasn't a test of your character. It was a test of theirs. You weren't the one being examined. They were. Your presence in their life was the measuring stick. Your kindness exposed their cruelty. Your honesty exposed their deceit. Your consistency revealed their instability. Your resilience highlighted their insecurity. You didn't have to do anything special. Your existence alone brought their true nature to the surface. People show who they are when they think they can get away with harming someone. That's when the masks slip, and the darkness they carry reveals itself fully. They thought they were evaluating your strength, your intelligence, your worthiness. They thought they were inspecting you, judging you, and determining your value from their limited perspective. But God was watching them, not you. It wasn't your reaction that mattered, it was their intention. It wasn't your suffering that revealed the lesson, it was their behavior. Every move they made documented their true character in a way nothing else could. This is why their attempt to destroy you failed so dramatically. The situation was never about breaking you, it was about exposing them. You were the mirror they could not hide from. You were the moment of truth they didn't expect. You were the assignment that revealed what was living inside them. And now the consequences they're facing aren't because you were weak, they're because they were dark. The trial was theirs from the beginning, and now the verdict is arriving. Number 7. They are headed for judgment because they targeted the one person whose survival redefined truth in their entire story. Everything they built, every rumor, every lie, every twisted version of the story was designed to stand only if you didn't make it through. Their entire narrative depended on you collapsing. That was the foundation of their confidence. They felt safe because they believed you would break, disappear, or fail to rise from what they threw at you. If you had fallen, their story would have lived uncontested. People would have believed them because there would have been no evidence pointing in another direction. Your silence, your suffering, your absence would have been the perfect validation for their falsehoods. But you didn't fall. You didn't fold. You didn't vanish. You survived. And that survival is the one thing they never accounted for. The moment you kept standing, their whole script started unraveling. Your existence became the contradiction they can't escape. Your strength became the spotlight exposing everything they tried to bury. The truth is, you didn't just survive. You made their lies impossible to maintain. And now every word they ever uttered against you is collapsing under the weight of the reality they can't deny. You're still here, stronger, clearer, untouched by what was supposed to destroy you. That's why they're panicking. Not because they care about you, but because they're realizing the truth is louder than their manipulation. They built their identity around making you look inferior, unstable, or guilty. And your survival destroys that image entirely. Their reputation now carries cracks, their confidence is slipping, Their lies have no legs left to stand on. When God decides to collapse a lie, he doesn't have to shout, punish, or create chaos. All he has to do is protect the truth. And you're the truth they tried to erase, the truth they underestimated, the truth that exposes their motives without you ever having to speak. Their judgment isn't coming because you fought back, it's coming because you survived. And in the end, that survival is the evidence that will rewrite every part of their story they thought would stay hidden. Number 8, they wanted power over your life because they had none over their own. People who try to manipulate, harm, or control others almost always have one thing in common. They're powerless in their own lives. They don't have direction. They don't have inner stability. They don't have spiritual grounding. So instead of fixing themselves, they latch onto someone they think they can dominate. Your life became a distraction from their own emptiness. Your light became a target because it exposed how dim things were within them. They weren't after your downfall because they were strong. They were after it because they were spiritually bankrupt. When people lack purpose, they crave power. Not real power, the artificial kind that comes from controlling someone else's emotions, opportunities, or sense of peace. They don't know how to build their own destiny, so they try to break yours. They don't know how to elevate their own path, so they aim to sabotage yours. Darkness is their currency because they can't create anything meaningful from within. Jealousy becomes their motivation, obsession becomes their strategy, and destruction becomes their coping mechanism. What irritated their spirit the most was that you didn't bend, you didn't crumble the way they expected, you didn't fall under their pressure, and when they realized they couldn't control you, their ego reacted like it had been insulted personally. They tried harder, pushed deeper, and crossed lines that were never meant to be crossed. Their pride wrote the script, and their darkness acted it out. They were so convinced of their own influence that they didn't see how powerless they actually were. But spiritual laws never ignore arrogance. The ego can promise things the spirit can't pay for, and that's exactly what happened. They took actions their soul wasn't strong enough to cover. They made decisions their character couldn't sustain. Every attempt to hurt you was like adding another charge to a bill they would eventually have to face. And now the debt is due. Not because you demanded revenge, but because they interfered with a life that wasn't theirs to manipulate. They didn't lose because you were powerful. They lost because they were empty. Their collapse is simply the fullness of what they tried to hide. Number 9. God didn't just block their attack. He preserved the version of you that would witness their consequences. Your survival was never simply about making it through the storm. It wasn't just about walking out alive, unharmed or stronger. There's a deeper layer that people rarely talk about. God preserved the exact version of you that needed to be present when their consequences finally arrive. You weren't protected just so you could continue life. You were protected so you could witness the full circle moment with clarity, maturity, and awareness. You had to grow into a version of yourself capable of seeing their downfall without bitterness, without fear, and without revenge. What tried to take you out wasn't strong enough to end you, but it was strong enough to shape you. While they were working overtime to destroy you, God was working consistently to prepare you. Your endurance became evidence that their plans failed. Every day you kept going, every moment you refused to fold, every breath you took was part of the divine setup. You weren't surviving by accident, you were being positioned. And here's what makes it even more powerful. God didn't let you break because your presence is part of the accountability process. Some consequences don't fully land until the person sees the very one they tried to destroy, standing tall, thriving, and unshaken. Your survival becomes the mirror they cannot avoid. Your resilience becomes the testimony they cannot deny. Your growth becomes the spotlight that exposes everything they tried to hide. This isn't payback, it's revelation. God wanted you alive long enough to witness how the story ends, not because you're vengeful, but because your presence is part of the truth. The same people who wished your silence will now have to deal with your existence. The same ones who planned your ending will watch you enter a new beginning. You didn't just escape their attack, you outlived their intentions. And now, as consequences start unfolding, you won't hear about it from a distance. You'll witness it from a place of strength, healed, awakened, and fully aware that your endurance was never random. It was always part of the sentencing. Number 10. Their downfall will be public because their intentions were private. There's a certain kind of confidence people get when they believe no one sees what they're doing. They move boldly in the dark, convinced the shadows will protect them from accountability. They whispered lies behind closed doors. They plotted quietly, thinking privacy was the perfect shield. They thought that because their hands were hidden, their actions would be forgotten. But every silent intention carries a vibration that heaven hears louder than any spoken word. And when God decides to respond, he doesn't match the secrecy. He exposes it. What they tried to bury in silence will come crashing into daylight. Not because you asked for revenge, not because you shouted your story, but because spiritual law has a way of flipping the script exactly when it will teach the most powerful lesson. Their downfall is scheduled for the moment when visibility hurts the most, right when they want to appear stable, respectable, or untouchable. The truth has perfect timing, and it reveals itself when it cuts the deepest. People who plan wickedness in private always assume two things: that no one knows and that no one will ever know. That confidence is their undoing. Because secrecy creates a false sense of safety. It tricks them into believing they are protected by silence, when in reality, silence is the very thing that guarantees no one will show up to defend them when everything comes out. When their masks fall, they fall alone. God doesn't just expose actions, he exposes intentions. He doesn't bring truth to light to embarrass you, he brings it out to free you. And the very things they did quietly, the things they never expected to surface, will become the loudest chapters of their consequence. Their downfall will echo because their plans were whispered. Their punishment will be public because their cruelty was hidden. That's the balance. And when everything unfolds, the world won't be confused. The truth will be so clear, so undeniable, so perfectly aligned with what they tried to hide that no explanation will be needed. The darkness they trusted will betray them, and the light they feared will reveal them. That is the destiny of those who plot against chosen ones. Quiet planning, loud judgment. Number 11. They didn't just fail to take your life. They activated a level of divine authority you didn't know you had. What they did to you was never just an attack. It was an activation. The moment they tried to harm you, they triggered something they were completely unprepared for. They thought they were coming for a vulnerable human being, someone they assumed was unprotected, unaware, or easy to manipulate. But their attack hit a spiritual lineage that existed long before you and will continue long after you. They didn't just awaken your strength, they awakened your ancestry, your calling, and the authority that was wired into your soul. There are certain gifts you don't discover until you're forced to. There are certain levels of protection you don't witness until someone crosses the exact line they shouldn't. When they tried to take your life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, they touched a chord that connected to generations of divine protection. They didn't know that taking a swing at you meant swinging at everything God placed behind you, and that's where their downfall started. Your survival wasn't just survival, it was a spiritual announcement. It revealed that you're not powered by your own strength, but by the inheritance you carry. A protection you didn't work for, a covering you didn't beg for, a force that has accompanied every chosen one throughout time. What they attacked wasn't just you, it was the history, the assignment, the blueprint encoded into your existence. And here's what they never realized. Chosen ones often don't recognize their own authority until someone tries to destroy it. You didn't know how deeply you were guarded until danger tried to swallow you. You didn't realize how powerful your presence was until someone attempted to erase it. Their attack didn't weaken you, it revealed you. The energy they used to break you became the key that unlocked another dimension of your identity. They tried to silence you, and instead awakened a voice that carries spiritual weight. They tried to block your path, and instead activated a force that clears paths before you even arrive. They tried to erase you, and instead exposed the truth of who you are, untouchable by the forces that tried to end you. They fought you thinking you were ordinary. They lost because you were never fighting alone. Number 12. Their karma isn't delayed, it's being tailored. What looks like a delay is really design. Nothing about their consequences is late, it's calculated. When God handles justice, he doesn't move fast, he moves exact. That's why it feels quiet right now. That's why everything looks calm on the surface. He's not ignoring what they did. He's preparing a response that fits every detail of their intention. People often mistake silence for mercy. They think because lightning didn't strike the moment they acted, they escaped accountability. But spiritual justice doesn't work on impulse, it works on measurement. Their karma isn't on pause, it's being built to specification. Every lie they told, every thought they weaponized, every moment they enjoyed watching you struggle is being entered into a blueprint that will unfold when it makes the deepest impact. This is why you don't see immediate fallout. God doesn't give them generic consequences, he gives them personalized correction, the kind that matches the depth of their motives, not just their actions, the kind that leaves no room for denial, the kind that exposes the truth without you ever needing to speak on it. They thought they dodged consequences because life didn't collapse the moment they hurt you. But the only reason it didn't collapse yet is because heaven is arranging the timing so that when the unraveling begins, nothing they built can withstand it. Justice arrives exactly when it reveals the full weight of their choices, not before, not after. And here's the part they never expected. The punishment will teach them what they refused to learn when life was peaceful. Karma hits hardest when it lands at the height of someone's pride, not the depth of their chaos. So when it arrives, it won't just shake their world, it will mirror the harm they crafted for yours. So no, their karma isn't slow, it's specialized, not late, perfectly timed, not random, customized to their intent. And when it unfolds, they'll realize the delay was never protection, it was precision. Number 13. The reason God will take their life path away instantly is because they tried to interrupt yours permanently. What they did wasn't innocent, impulsive, or accidental. They didn't just inconvenience you, they attempted to rewrite a destiny that wasn't theirs to touch. They aimed to sabotage a path God architected before you were even born. And when someone tries to permanently interfere with a divine assignment, the consequences will always come in a form that feels just as permanent to them. God is not emotional, he is exact. He doesn't lash out in anger. He responds in alignment with the truth of what was done. They tried to cut off your future, so he will cut off the roots they believed were secured. They tried to choke your opportunities, so he will close the doors they assumed would always open. They attempted to tamper with the trajectory of your life, so he will remove the stability of theirs. Not out of spite, but out of spiritual balance. People forget that destiny has rules. You can hurt someone's feelings and still recover. But the moment you attempt to interfere with someone's divine timeline, you are no longer operating in conflict, you are operating in trespass. and heaven does not tolerate trespassing. What they tried to destroy was not just your confidence or your peace, but the very storyline God himself crafted. That's why his response is sharp and sudden. That's why it happens without warning. God will interrupt their life path instantly because they tried to permanently interrupt yours. And unlike humans, he doesn't need to think twice when protecting something sacred. The moment they plotted against your future, they forfeited parts of theirs. The moment they tried to close your chapter, they unknowingly signed the ending of their own. That's how spiritual law works. What they wished upon your life becomes the exact point where theirs begins to collapse. So when God steps in, it won't be delayed. It won't be gentle. It won't be reversible. It will be instant, because that's the same permanence they aimed at you. Number 14. Their fate is sealed because they forgot. One critical rule. You don't get to play executioner with someone who was sent as a messenger. There's a law that most people don't understand, one that operates quietly but with absolute authority. You cannot interfere with someone who carries a divine purpose without paying the price. Chosen ones aren't protected because they're flawless. They're protected because they're purposeful. Every step, every breath, every moment of endurance is part of a bigger design that ordinary forces cannot rewrite. And anyone who thinks they can act as the executioner of such a life is walking straight into consequences they cannot escape. The people who tried to harm you weren't just fighting another human being. They weren't testing your strength or luck. They were attempting to interrupt an assignment that God himself orchestrated. That's a line that cannot be crossed. Every lie they plotted, every trap they set, every dark thought they cultivated against you became a direct act of rebellion against divine order. And when that happens, punishment isn't optional. It's automatic. The irony is brutal. They believed they were in control, that their strategies, manipulations, and attacks would succeed. They had no idea they were writing the script for their own undoing. They treated your life as if it were theirs to influence, as if your path could be stolen, paused, or destroyed. In reality, they activated a chain of accountability that no human or worldly power could halt. They weren't harming you. They were signing their own verdict. Their actions were a declaration of defiance against authority they didn't even comprehend. Every moment they thought they had an advantage, the universe was quietly preparing the correction. Every plan they made was a blueprint for their own judgment. Their fate is sealed not because of revenge, not because of retaliation, but because there is a spiritual law that governs interference with the chosen. You were a messenger, a vessel, a purpose-filled force, and crossing that threshold triggers consequences that cannot be avoided. They forgot the rule, underestimated the system, and now the correction is inevitable. What they tried to end will survive, and what they thought was safe is about to collapse. What they tried to do to you was never just about your life. It was about their illusions, their arrogance, and their attempt to play God with something that was never theirs to control. Every plan, every lie, every attack they launched was a step toward the very consequences they thought they could escape. The irony is brutal and undeniable. The energy they poured into destroying you has been redirected piece by piece into documenting their own downfall. They thought secrecy would protect them. They thought manipulation and deception would hide their true nature. They assumed that if they could break you, their story would be believable, their power unquestioned, and their darkness undetected. But what they never accounted for is that God doesn't just protect. You were positioned to witness, to rise, and to expose. Every attack against you became evidence against them. Every attempt to harm you became proof of their own instability, and every plan to stop you became a blueprint for their collapse. You were never on trial. They were. Your endurance revealed their weakness. Your survival shattered their lies. Your alignment with purpose and divine timing activated forces they could not see and could never understand. What they tried to steal, silence, or destroy in your life is now the instrument of their judgment. Their karma isn't delayed, it's tailored. Their fate is sealed, public, and inescapable. The moment they crossed the line, they triggered a chain reaction that cannot be undone. And here is the truth every chosen one needs to understand. Your life is protected not because you are flawless, but because you are purposeful. They didn't just attack a human being, they tried to interrupt a divine assignment. And no interference with destiny goes unanswered. Every lie they built, every trap they set, every dark thought they harbored against you, is now returning in the exact measure they intended for someone else. What they hoped would end you has ended them. What they thought they could hide is now exposed. And what they believed they controlled is now out of reach. So stand tall, rise fully, and let the energy of your endurance become the evidence of divine justice. Your life, your survival, and your clarity are proof that God doesn't just protect. He corrects, He restores, and He elevates. If this message spoke to your spirit, make sure you like the video to show your support. Comment your thoughts or experiences below to inspire others. Share it with someone who needs this truth, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep, powerful spiritual revelations.